After my dad's sudden death, my stepmom faked a smile and took everything he built, then handed the CEO title to her failure of a son, claiming it was my dad's final wish. I said nothing. Just canceled every deal, walked away, and waited. The next morning, the company started to crumble. They called me begging. I answered with a smile. You played dirty. Now watch what happens next. If someone had told me a year ago that my life would turn upside down in the blink of an eye, I probably would have laughed it off. Back then, I believed in hard work, loyalty, and most of all, family. Especially my father, Richard Collins. He built Collins Textiles from the ground up, right here in Charlotte, North Carolina. What started as a small fabric warehouse turned into one of the city's most respected textile firms. And I was proud to be part of it. I joined the business fresh out of college. I was 26 at the time, wide-eyed and full of ideas. I started at the bottom, running spreadsheets, assisting in shipping, working late to understand the machinery and supply chains. My father believed in earning your place, not handing it to you. I respected that. For 8 years, I worked side by side with him, slowly climbing the ladder, not just because I was his daughter, but because I proved myself every single day. The truth is, I never expected shortcuts. I didn't want them. I earned the trust of our employees, the respect of our vendors, and over time, I became the person people came to for answers. My father and I didn't always agree, but he always listened. That's what made us a good team. Everything changed the day his car went off the road. It was raining heavily that morning. I still remember the sound of the phone call, the way my heart dropped before I even answered. A police officer.
A wreck.
Immediate death. I couldn't process the words. My father was gone.
Just like that.
The days after his death were a blur. Funeral arrangements, calls from the board, legal paperwork. It all felt cold and fast. I was drowning in grief, but I still showed up at the office because I knew that's what he would have done. I thought I would be stepping in, at least temporarily, to keep the company steady. That's when things started to shift. My stepmother, Victoria, had married my father when I was 19. I never disliked her, but we were never close either. She was always pleasant in public, polite in front of others, but something about her always felt a little rehearsed. She rarely showed interest in the company, and she didn't get involved in day-to-day operations. At least not while my father was alive. Within a week of his passing, Victoria appointed herself as the interim controller of Collins Textiles. She claimed she was just helping out, but suddenly, I wasn't invited to board discussions. Documents I used to have access to were now locked behind passwords I didn't have. When I asked questions, she brushed me off with vague replies and tight smiles. Then came the board meeting. I was told it was to discuss leadership moving forward. I walked in expecting to offer my support in keeping things running smoothly. Instead, I walked into an ambush. Victoria stood at the head of the long oak table, holding a stack of documents. Her son, my stepbrother Liam, sat beside her in a brand new suit, looking smug and uncomfortable at the same time. She cleared her throat and announced that my father had left behind an updated will. According to this so-called final document, Richard Collins wanted Liam to take over the company as CEO. I froze. Liam? The same Liam who had failed at 3 different business ventures in the last 5 years? The same guy who never once showed interest in the textile industry? My father had barely even discussed work with him. I looked around the room, expecting someone to question it, to push back, but the board members were nodding, shaking hands, congratulating Liam like everything made sense. My heart was pounding. I wanted to scream, but I kept my mouth shut. Years of working in a man's world had taught me how to control my expression. No one saw the betrayal in my eyes. I smiled, nodded, and left the room without saying a word. But inside I was burning. Not just from anger, but confusion. Something wasn't right. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, replaying the meeting in my head. The timing of everything felt too clean, too rehearsed. My gut told me that document wasn't real. And if it wasn't, then Victoria and Liam weren't just pushing me aside. They were stealing something that wasn't theirs. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't confront Victoria. Instead, I called someone I trusted. Mark Reynolds was a quiet, sharp investigator I had hired once before for a company background check on a potential partner. I told him everything, my suspicions, the will, how quickly Victoria took control. I asked him to look into it quietly. "Give me a week," he said. It took him 3 days. Mark showed up at my office early one morning with a thick folder. Inside were bank records, digital signatures, transfers, and emails, evidence that made my skin crawl. Not only had Victoria and Liam forged my father's will, but they had begun transferring company funds into hidden accounts, created under shell corporations with Liam's name on them. They were draining the business before they even officially took control. I sat there in silence as Mark explained it all. He kept asking if I wanted to confront them, take legal action immediately. But I wasn't ready.
Not yet.
See, if I exploded now, they'd twist it. Call me emotional. Say I was grieving, not thinking straight. I'd be the angry daughter, throwing accusations out of jealousy.
No.
I needed more than truth, I needed timing. So, I told Mark to keep digging. Quietly. I had a different plan in mind. I stopped attending meetings. I told the staff I needed time off. What I was really doing was watching, studying every move they made. I still had access to some back-end reports through an old login Liam didn't know about. And what I saw made me sick. They were laying off senior staff, delaying vendor payments, taking huge personal expenses through the company. Everything my father built was being shredded for their own gain. But I waited. 1 month. That's how long it took before the cracks started to show. Contractors began pulling out. Employees started quitting. And investors? They started asking questions. That's when I made the call. Not to them. Not to the board. I called a journalist. Someone with reach. And I gave her everything. I wasn't going to scream in a meeting. I was going to burn their lies down in the public eye. I still remember the look on the reporter's face when I slid the file across the table. We met in a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of town, where no one knew me and even fewer cared. She opened the folder slowly, scanning the first few pages in silence. Her eyes widened as she realized what she was holding: fraud reports, fake bank transfers, forged emails, and a will that had never seen a courtroom. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. The proof spoke for itself. "I'll need to verify everything," she said carefully. "Of course," I replied. "But be quick. They're bleeding the company dry." She gave me a sharp nod, already pulling out her phone. That's when I knew things were finally in motion. I had kept quiet for a month, watched them ruin my father's legacy without flinching. But now it was my turn to move. 2 days later, the headline dropped. Collins Textiles faces leadership scandal, fraud, forgery, and family feud exposed. It spread like wildfire. Every local business outlet picked it up. Some national ones, too. I woke up to my phone buzzing with texts, calls, emails. Reporters wanted statements. Investors wanted answers. Employees, some of whom I hadn't spoken to in weeks, messaged me in disbelief. The silence I had kept for so long had turned into a storm. And Victoria and Liam? They didn't even see it coming. By noon, a second article followed, this one even more damaging. It included a leaked portion of the forged will, courtesy of my investigator's digital trail. Side-by-side comparisons showed the original will and the fake one, with timestamps and legal signatures that didn't match. It was no longer just my word against theirs. It was evidence. That same day, I received an email from the board's legal team asking me to attend an emergency meeting. I didn't reply.
Not yet.
I wanted to let the pressure build. It didn't take long. By evening, Victoria released a statement calling the reports deeply hurtful lies meant to destroy a grieving family. I laughed when I read it. She didn't even deny the will was fake. Just called everything hurtful. That was her game. Emotional manipulation. Always playing the victim. But the truth doesn't care about your tears. 3 days later, the authorities got involved. Mark had handed everything to them. Quietly, legally, and without my name attached. I stayed out of the spotlight on purpose. I didn't need fame. I needed justice. On a rainy Thursday morning, I got the call I'd been waiting for. "They've been arrested," Mark said simply. Fraud, embezzlement, forgery, the works. I didn't say anything right away. Just sat in my car, holding the steering wheel with both hands, staring at the road in front of me. It didn't feel real. I thought I'd feel victorious, maybe even happy. But what I felt was calm, like the silence right after a thunderstorm. I knew it wasn't over yet. Arrests are just the beginning. The court hearing started a few weeks later. The board quickly distanced themselves from Victoria and Liam, acting as if they'd never supported them.
Typical.
I sat in the back row during the first hearing, unnoticed. Watching. Listening. The judge reviewed the evidence piece by piece. Emails. Financial trails. The original will, retrieved from my father's lawyer's office, stamped and sealed with proper signatures. It was undeniable. Then came the day I took the stand. I told the court about my 8 years of work, how I had managed operations, negotiated contracts, modernized our supply chain. I explained how I had been shut out overnight, how Victoria manipulated everyone with a forged document, and how Liam, with no experience, was handed the title of CEO like it was a party favor. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I spoke clearly and calmly, just like my father taught me. Facts. Evidence.
Truth.
The judge nodded as I finished. He turned to the defense and said, "I see no reason to delay this decision further." That was the moment. The fake will was thrown out. My father's original succession plan, naming me as sole heir and CEO, was reinstated. The assets Liam and Victoria had tried to steal were returned. I got the house, the estate, and most importantly, I got back Colin's textiles. When I stepped outside the courthouse that day, the sky was clear. For the first time in months, I could breathe. But I didn't waste time celebrating. There was too much damage to fix. The company was a mess. Contracts lost, staff laid off, bills unpaid. I returned to the office quietly. There was no big announcement, no welcome banner. Just me, walking into the place I had helped build, like I had done every day for the last 8 years. Only this time it was mine. Some employees were nervous when they saw me. Others looked relieved. I didn't judge anyone. I knew how power games worked. People say what they need to say to protect their jobs. I wasn't here for revenge on them. I was here to rebuild. First, I called back every employee who had been wrongfully let go. Then I sat with the finance team and sorted through the mess. Payments, invoices, debt. We faced it all, line by line. Some days I barely slept. I had to meet with vendors and repair broken trust. Had to reassure investors that I wasn't just another name on a desk. I was the person who had been running things all along, they just didn't know it. Within a month, the company was stable again. Not perfect, but standing. And that was enough. One morning, I walked into my father's old office. It had been untouched since the day he died. I stood there for a moment, letting the memories settle. Then I sat down at his desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out a small photo frame. It was the two of us, taken during the company's 20th anniversary party. He had his arm around my shoulders, smiling like he always did when he was proud. "I got it back, Dad," I whispered. "Everything they tried to take. I brought it all home." But deep down, I knew I hadn't done it for revenge. I did it for him. And for me. The weeks that followed felt like rebuilding something from the ashes. Every room I walked into at the company still echoed with the damage they had caused. Employees unsure if they could trust me, partners hesitant to sign new deals, and old friends who had once been allies now strangely silent. But I didn't blame them. Fear makes people do strange things. I had lived it, felt it, survived it. And I knew the only way to earn back their trust was not with speeches, but with action. So, I got to work. One of the first things I did was sit down with our department heads, one by one. I didn't enter the room with an agenda. I just listened. I wanted to hear what had been broken, what had been lost, and what they thought needed to change. Most of them had never really been heard before. My father had always been respected, but he ran the business his way, and Victoria never listened to anyone unless it benefited her directly. It took time, but slowly, I saw the shift, shoulders relaxing in meetings, real opinions being shared, and small moments of respect returning. It wasn't just about fixing the damage. I wanted to do more than that. I wanted to reshape Collins Textiles into the company my father always dreamed of, but never quite had time to build. He once told me, during one of our late-night talks at the office, "Emma, one day this place will be yours. When it is, don't just run it, elevate it." Those words stayed with me. So I brought back the old ethics policy he had drafted years ago but never implemented. I launched a new sustainability initiative that prioritized eco-friendly fabrics and waste reduction in the production line. We partnered with local charities to train and hire women from underserved communities. For the first time, our company wasn't just producing fabric. We were weaving something bigger, something that mattered. But of course, not everyone liked the changes. A few former allies of Victoria tried to push back quietly. I could see it in their guarded eyes and hear it in their vague suggestions during board meetings. Whispers of concern about profit margins and risky new directions. I wasn't surprised. Some of them had benefited during her short reign. Silent approvals, inflated bonuses, contracts handed to friends of friends. Cleaning house would take more than good intentions. I reviewed every executive contract personally. Some were cut. Others were given the chance to stay, under new terms of course. Loyalty to the company, not to personal gain. And slowly, the rot began to clear. But the world outside the walls of my office wasn't quiet either. Victoria and Liam had both pleaded not guilty. Their lawyers pushed for bail, tried to delay hearings, filed motions. The courtroom drama stretched on in the background while I focused on rebuilding. I didn't speak to them. Not once. I didn't need to. Everything I had to say was already in the evidence I gave the court. And besides, they no longer mattered. They had chosen their side. And I had chosen mine. Still, part of me couldn't help but wonder what was going through Liam's mind now. He had always been someone who thought charm could get him through anything. Smooth words, nice suits, and big promises he couldn't keep. I remembered once overhearing him on the phone, before all this happened, talking about some new app idea that he said would make him a millionaire by 30. I had laughed at the time. Now it just made me sad. He never wanted to work for anything. He just wanted what looked shiny from the outside. And my stepmother? She wanted power. Not to build something, but to control it. And when they saw my father was no longer there to stop them, they struck. But they underestimated me. They thought I would break quietly, disappear, cry in a corner while they smiled for cameras and moved into the office I had earned. What they didn't see was that all those years I worked under my father, I wasn't just learning the business. I was building armor. I was learning how to fight without raising my voice, how to win without showing all my cards. My father taught me that. And so did life. One afternoon, I received a letter, handwritten, no return address. I opened it slowly. It was from Victoria. Her handwriting was as neat and elegant as always. She didn't apologize. She didn't take responsibility. Instead, she wrote that she was deeply disappointed in how things turned out, that I had chosen destruction over forgiveness, that she hoped I could find peace eventually. I read it twice. Then I folded it, placed it back in the envelope, and dropped it in the shredder. There was nothing left to forgive. Liam didn't write me. He never would. He had vanished the moment bail was denied. His silence said more than any letter ever could. The days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Collins Textiles was thriving again. We had regained 2 major contracts and landed a new deal with a global clothing brand that saw potential in our ethical direction. Every time I walked through the factory floor and saw people smiling again, machines humming with purpose, I knew we were back, not just surviving, but growing. And yet, even with all of that, something still weighed on me. It wasn't bitterness or anger anymore. It was something harder to name. A quiet ache that came with knowing my father never got to see any of this. He never saw how close we came to losing it all, or how I fought to win it back. Sometimes I would sit alone in his office, now mine, and think about everything. I had my father's photo on the desk, and sometimes, in my quieter moments, I'd speak to it. Not out loud, but in my head. I did what I had to do. I'd tell him. They tried to erase everything. But I wouldn't let them. And deep down, I hoped wherever he was, he knew that I kept his promise, that I protected his legacy, that his daughter didn't break. She rebuilt. It's strange how quickly the world forgets the villains once they lose their power. After the trial, once the news cycle slowed and the headlines moved on, it was as if Victoria and Liam had never existed inside Collins Textiles. Their names were no longer whispered in the hallways. The office door that once held Liam's temporary title had been repainted, his belongings long cleared. Staff stopped asking about them. Clients stopped bringing them up. It was like they had become ghosts, haunting no one but themselves. Victoria was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Liam got 4. Financial fraud, forgery, corporate theft, it all caught up with them. I didn't attend the final sentencing. I didn't need to. Justice had been served. Quietly, thoroughly. I chose to stay focused on the company, on the people who still mattered, and on the legacy I had reclaimed. Revenge never drove me. It was about restoration. It was about survival. About a year after the whole storm had passed, I got an invitation to speak at a local business leadership conference. I almost turned it down. I didn't see myself as a speaker, and I wasn't interested in being the center of attention. But something about it felt right. So I said yes. When I stood on that stage, under the bright lights, looking out at the crowd, I didn't talk about balance sheets or quarterly profits. I talked about betrayal. About what it feels like when the people closest to you turn their backs, when the thing you've worked so hard to build is almost taken away overnight. I told them that silence is sometimes the most powerful weapon you can use. That being underestimated is a gift, if you know how to use it. After the speech, people lined up to talk to me. Some were just curious. Others shared their own stories of losing what they loved, of fighting to reclaim it. It reminded me that my story wasn't unique. Betrayal doesn't only live in boardrooms. It happens everywhere, at kitchen tables, in friendships, in families. I often think about my father these days. I don't remember him as the businessman everyone admired. I remember him as the man who used to take me for ice cream after late-night work shifts, who made me read contracts out loud so I'd never miss a detail, who once told me, "Real strength is quiet. You don't need to shout to be heard." At the time, I didn't understand it. Now, I live by it. The company is stronger now than it's ever been. We've expanded into new states, developed partnerships overseas, and we're even planning a scholarship in my father's name for students interested in sustainable textile production. Collins Textiles isn't just a business anymore, it's a vision. And it's mine now. Fully, legally, and without question.